Hi there, you're listening to Unnatural Selection, the show about newsy type stuff and things. My name is George.
My name is Adam.
And with our powers combined, we are Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com.
Back for another week.
Back for another week.
Without Tom, unfortunately. Tom is still off herding wild goats in central New South Wales.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise known as the ACT, of course.
Mm-hmm.
They've got lots of goats that just roam the ACT, so he's off herding those. And we wish him well on his quest to find self-enlightenment in the goat herding contest. So
that's a contest.
It is a contest, yeah. There's people there from New Zealand as well.
Mm-hmm.
Although they're sort of more on the sheep side of things.
Naturally.
Just throw in a New Zealand sheep joke there for anyone who wasn't listening. So you'll be listening to the dulcet tones of myself and George for the next 60-odd-ish minutes. So if you don't want that, turn off the radio now.
Well, first of all, we're not on the radio. Second of all, don't tell the listeners to turn off. That's the number one rule of podcasting is don't tell your limited number of listeners to disengage with the content immediately.
No, please stay. I love you.
Please don't. Please don't go.
No, we are a podcast about newsy type stuff and things. And the newsy type stuff and things this week have been sort of centered around that we've been picking up on anyway. Obviously, there's lots of things happening, but somehow defamation lawsuits are just like going out the wazoo at the moment. And also, apparently, the previous government just stopped doing stuff over the last 12 months. But what should we start with? The defamation side of things, George?
Let's start with the Friendly Geordies defamation case. So Friendly Geordies, also known as Jordan Shanks, has it was in a court case last year that we did discuss where he was found to have defamed John Barilaro, former New South Wales state politician. No, I'm not going to make any and current jokes about John Barilaro because he's proved himself to be sufficiently litigious that I'm not going to say nasty things about him or his appearance. So it has been found since then, I guess Barilaro, as part of this defamation suit. Well, so from what I recall about the Jordan Shanks case, they didn't actually find against him. They came to a settlement.
So Jordan Shanks and whatever media apparatus and his producer were running with, they quietly settled in the background, and all of a sudden Jordan Shanks stopped posting angry videos about him.
About John Barilaro.
Came to an abrupt close.
Just real quietly. So to clarify, he didn't lose the defamation case, but they settled, and Jordan Shanks paid an undisclosed amount of dollaritos to Mr. John Barilaro in order to settle the case. That was my understanding of it. So now John Barilaro has been awarded, separately to that, $715,000 from Google as a result of this, quote, relentless and vicious campaign, unquote, of cyberbullying that led him to resign from politics prematurely.
Google, and by extension YouTube, which is the platform that we're actually talking about here, YouTube, because that's the service that Friendly Geordies uses, they're a YouTube channel.
Yep.
They were found to be the publisher of such content, right? So and we've discussed this previously about what is a publisher? Like, what is the publisher? I don't understand what so basically, if you're sharing a material of a content creator, if you're hosting that, and particularly, and this is the point that the judge picked up on, if you're making money off the ad revenue from such content, you are a publisher, whether you like it or not. You can be all, we're just a platform, bro. We're just sharing it. We're not content creators.
Metaverse.
Free speech, metaverse. Like the what was that show that did about 3 or 4 seasons? Nuts Gone Startup, I think it might be. It's had like the guy from the OC on it and a bunch of other.
Oh yes, it was called Startup. Yeah,
Startup. Yeah. Anyway, which was literally about this.
Adam Brody. Because they're doing a start. Initially, they started up a cryptocurrency, which I think the writers kind of like heard a lot of stuff about cryptocurrency and then decided to write a show about cryptocurrency without necessarily really understanding the concept of cryptocurrency. They're like, it's a stable coin and it's going to something about poor people in Africa. And they're like, but also we're going to make a bunch of money off it somehow. I'm like, those two things they can't exist at the same time, I don't think. And then they switched it to be about, okay, we're doing a dark web now. We're doing our own personal dark web. Forget the cryptocurrency stuff. Don't worry about that. Now it's a dark web. We're doing a dark web. That's something that we understand a little bit better. And then, of course, as soon as you do a dark web, it becomes about, freedom of speech and, who's got the ability to transact on these platforms, and are you sort of facilitating terrorism by... It was quite interesting. I didn't mind it. I thought it was a little bit like glossy Hollywood version of the thing, but I thought it was an interesting show.
Is the same as this, right? Is YouTube a publisher? In which case they are. There's precedence now. This was like several years ago when it was still like, oh, we can't wrap our heads around this.
Yeah.
Now, yes, YouTube is a publisher. So they have to pay the $715,000. And what was interesting is, as a part of this case, a lot more has come out about sort of the effect on Barilaro. And whether you believe necessarily that he's, was a good deputy premier.
And for the record, I do not. I would like to submit that I don't think he was a good deputy premier.
Yeah, I mean, what is clear, at least, I think, from the court transcripts, is that the whole Friendly Geordies thing had a real effect on him to the point where, according to him, that is his testimony. he wanted to drop the whole thing because he couldn't. It was too stressful to pursue the defamation suit. But I mean,
he said he was just after an apology initially, but I'll take $715,000. I'll take it. If you're offering it. If it was just about an apology, I think they would have the suit would have probably wrapped up a long time ago, to be perfectly honest. But there you go.
I mean, part of the main thrust, I think, of where they were getting at was that there were quote unquote racist undertones or direct comments on the video, which were about his ethnicity, which probably fair enough. I mean,
as someone who is both Italian and Greek, I don't know. I personally would not have been offended by the things that Jordan Shanks said, but then also I wouldn't have done the things that John Barilaro did to attract Jordan Shanks's attention in the first place, maybe. So I do think, and part of this is, described at. There was a statement here that said. Justice Stephen Reyes said, quote, people in public life like Mr. Barilaro must have broad backs and be prepared to face harsh criticism. And I kind of agree with that. Like, whether you think the criticism was fair or not, like Jordan Shanks is a YouTube comedian and John Barilaro was the second most powerful person in New South Wales. So it's like, I don't know. I kind of feel like that's part of the job is getting criticized. Yeah. And
what I'm not sure about, though, is with this defamation, and it wasn't clear from the articles that I've read about what imputations were seen to be untrue. Obviously, the racist stuff, completely fair, and you could probably stand a case alone on that.
Yeah,
but because they were talking about sort of his, he was some sort of gangster, basically. And
there was, I think the parts of the case that were the strongest were, ironically, the parts about the racial vilification and hate speech and that sort of stuff. Yeah. Where it's like, well, yes, he was doing it for comedic effect, but I suppose if you put it in a transcript and take all the irony out of the tonality of it, it looks pretty fucking racist. But
it's the same as someone, mocking, if you're mocking an Asian person, if you're mocking a black person, you can't
stand-up
draw
act.
The line and go, you can't draw the line and go, well, it's okay to be rude to
mate, take any stand-up act and write it down on paper and then read it out in a court, and it's going to sound real fucked up. Could you imagine like like Chris Rock, Chris Rock's famous, there's black people and then there's N-words, that famous bit of his that he does, and do that read off a court transcript without any of the emotion, any of the tonality of it. Well, that's going to look not so good for Chris Rock, is it?
I guess communication, written communication is only 50% of communication.
Sure.
A lot of it's, everything else. So
I read that it was written down somewhere.
I guess my point being, my point being is that there's no real. I mean, it's probably somewhere you can find it. Like, I'm assuming if we were better researchers, you could find this. But the imputations around, his dealings in Parliament and whether or not he is quote unquote corrupt weren't really mentioned in any of the
Well,
articles.
here's the thing, and this is why I don't like that a judgment has come down in favor of him, because it does kind of like retcon all of those previous criticisms that Jordan Shanks had about him, which, I don't know, seemed pretty fair enough. They're all based on like public reporting. If you go back and watch the video, I remember watching those videos at the time, all based on public reporting. It's not stuff that you find in the Sydney Morning Herald. And like, yes, he was connecting threads and making assumptions about those things.
Yeah,
but like all of the information was based on stuff that's publicly available and out there. So I don't know. Yeah, like where we're sort of get by the transitive property of him having won this lawsuit is also getting a free pass on all the corruption stuff, which I don't know if that's necessarily fair.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not familiar with the inner workings of John Barilaro's heart. I haven't been, through an ICAC. I can't tell you with any degree of certitude whether those things are true or not, but it seems to me like it's just kind of been yada, yada, yada. It's like it has kind of been memory holed as a result of him winning this lawsuit. And I think there is some there that's worthy of further investigation and discussion. But
the thing is that the headlines that I have seen have been, oh no, he won the defamation suit.
He won, he's been cleared. That's the narrative.
Which
was the point, right? That's why you levy a defamation suit is to get your name cleared, right? It's the same thing when the Mueller report came out about Trump. Trump goes, great, I haven't been convicted. I haven't been referred for prosecution. Therefore, Trump cleared. And then the headlines were all Trump cleared. And he goes, yeah, see, look at the headlines. I've been cleared. Yeah. It's like, yeah, well, that was the point, wasn't it? You've won the narrative battle, which was the whole purpose.
And look, I probably not great work as a podcaster, as someone I probably should have gone and done a bit more research on it. But yeah, it just feels like that. All that has just been put to the background. And maybe some, as you said, Jordan Shanks, and I think he's a funny comedian. I've seen him live, and he does do voice, impersonations and stuff, which, could be construed as being sort of on edge, and he always does push the boundaries. The show I saw back in, I think, would have been 2015, 2016, something like that, was about how John Howard was the worst prime minister in Australia's history, which, a lot of people have a lot of opinions on. But it was a really funny show. It was reasonably well researched. But the thing is, as a comedian, and as we do here on the podcast, that there are threads and narratives that are pushed that you as the viewer don't necessarily, you can't sort of discern, because he doesn't actually put the sources in his videos. He flashes them up on the screen, goes, there was a news report, and then it's gone in like 3 seconds. You don't get to read the news report. You can go find it.
I understand.
You pause the frame and then go, okay, I'll Google it.
That's. I feel like the sort of going back to medium is the message there. Like the YouTube medium is very fast paced and snappy visuals. It's very
otherwise you turn off. Like you can't do a full bibliography. No one's going to fucking read that.
I mean, a lot of YouTubers will do things where they have like links in the description of the videos and things like that. I don't recall whether Friendly Geordies does that sort of stuff or not. Like from our perspective, we post in the show notes that you see that are sort of the notes of your phone, I reference all the articles that we've sort of directly mentioned in the show, so people can go and look at the source material if that's something that they're interested in. But like you say, all of the inferences, all of the commentary that you're making around those articles, that's you. And I kind of feel like that should be held to a different standard than like straight up news reporting and journalism, a YouTube comedian. You know what I mean? Like I feel like there are different standards or there should be.
I'm looking at an article now, which is just called Fatty, and it's about and then there's Clive Palmer's face sitting on the thumbnail.
We're talking about a Jordan Shanks video.
Yes. So
I don't think anyone, by any interpretation of the, like, if we start doing a body mass index or a DEXA scan of Clive Palmer, I don't think anyone could deny that the man is obese. So that is technically just a statement of fact.
I'm just looking at some of the. He does have links in his description. I'm just looking to see if they are actual. It just says check out these legends, and there's a bunch of links with people. Alex Williamson. They're actually other comedians, I think. So he doesn't actually post, as far as I can tell, his sources in his description. So you just kind of have to take.
But with that
videos.
said, I do get the impression he is well researched, like you said. Like
True.
they'll talk
He's a
about,
producer.
hey, we looked at this thing, and buried deep in this report there was a reference to this, and so clearly they've done some like legitimate, like journalistic, I guess, work in terms of like looking into the sources and things like that. I do get the impression that is part of their day-to-day kind of like
I think he's got
how
a
they put the
producer,
videos together.
The other guys that work for him. So I think he's obviously got more resources than we do.
They're more, but better research than us. So I don't know how that bodes well for us getting sued.
Here's the flip side, though. Like there are similar vein, like quote unquote, like avant-garde news services, and we talked about this once with the Ukraine war, called this place called the Grey Zone, who my friend
avant-garde news source is a very kind way of describing the Grey Zone, which is just Russian propaganda.
You look at their videos and they're like, we researched this and we got a source from here, you have to go like 3 layers deep. You go, well, who is this source? And then you look at this, and then you go, oh no, well, that's just.
Well, that's horseshit.
That's horseshit. Or like,
okay, so for example,
that source is questionable because it's a Twitter account, just a Twitter account that's linked to this pro-Russian. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like actively promoting disinformation. So on my YouTube channel, there was a person I know that shared a video. This is early on in sort of pandemic days, where I don't remember the title of my video. I think it was the one I did called Balance's Bias. Yeah, anyway, if you want to go to my YouTube channel and check that out. But essentially it was this person I know who is in my life, who I cannot get out of my life, posted a video saying that there was from this guy, Ben Swan was his name, is like, journalist Ben Swan, this guy knows what he's talking about. And Ben Swan was making the contention in this video that masks don't work, basically. I've done the research, looked at the papers, I've got the documents, and masks don't work, so you shouldn't use them, right? This is the early days of the pandemic. Very cooked. Anyway, so I was like, I'm just curious. I'm going to do like one level of Googling deep. So I found the study that he was talking about, looked at it, and it was a comparison between surgeons using N95 masks versus surgical masks, and saying that there was no appreciable difference in disease communication between those two things. It wasn't saying the difference between surgical masks and nothing. It was saying, like, it took, I literally just like, I didn't even read the whole report. I literally just read the abstract of the report and said, there's no discernible difference between N95 masks and surgical masks in this particular context, according to this sample size. Like, it is very gated in terms of the kinds of claims that it's making about, and obviously, like, I don't think there was anything specific to coronavirus about it. So it was like, this guy's just taken this study, deliberately misinterpreted it for his own commercial like interest, and then like making money off this video, which is like promoting disinformation, and doesn't say what the article that he's referring to actually says. That guy doesn't get sued for defamation. But, YouTube comedian does end up getting sued for defamation. I think it just shows how broken our information ecosystem is, because like, if you spend 5 minutes Googling it, you'll figure out that it's complete horseshit. But like 99.9% of people aren't going to do that, because why would they? They don't have an incentive to. They go, study says masks don't work. That's what I heard. And then they'll just believe that, even though it's not true. That's been, the key battleground perhaps over the last, I would say since Trump really got going back in 20. I feel like this has really been an issue, like a massive. It was always in the background, like, what is real, what is a real source of information. But like since the Trump era, it's become so much worse. And the pandemic just like turned it up to like a 15 on the 10 scale. But it is just cooked that like people are arguing over ivermectin and whether that's going to, whether some horse paste is going to cure COVID. And apparently that's a discussion that everyone can have in public. And that's just like roiling and going along, thousands of people contributing their dumb shit, nothing fucking nonsense opinions about it. That's fine. But like a YouTube comedian making fun of, the number 2 politician in New South Wales that cops a defamation suit. It just feels really arbitrary. It just feels like the people who are getting punished are the ones that piss off powerful people.
I like just to summarize on this. So Google, this is the Age's wording, and I feel like it's an interesting paragraph, but Google agreed the videos defamed Barilaro by wrongfully suggesting he was a corrupt con man who committed perjury, should be jailed for perjury, corruptly gave $3.3 billion to a beef company, corruptly voted against a royal commission into water theft, blackmailed councillors, and pocketed millions of dollars stolen from a council. Now, he's saying that all those, according to this paragraph, all those things are allegedly untrue. Or perhaps, at the very least.
Those were the things that Jordan Shanks alleged that haven't been proved to be true.
They haven't been proved to be true. Right. So, anyway. But it's interesting, on this topic, we're talking about sort of, what is real information and, people who are YouTube commentators getting sued. The next defamation sort of proceedings we're going to talk about are to do with Avi Yemeni, who's our favorite person, and and this is where it gets crazy. Just a Twitter account called PR Guy 17. Not they don't even know.
We don't know who PR Guy is. Yeah, it's just a random guy, and I follow the PR Guy account. Yeah, or girl. Could be a girl.
Or they, like,
or
whatever. We don't know who it is.
Non-gendered individual.
What if it's a bot? No.
That's a good bot. So PR Guy 17 is a Twitter account that I follow, and he does do good, funny tweets from a leftist sort of perspective, right? And Avi Yemeni...
the antithesis, yes, of that.
Yeah, so the antithesis of that, Avi Yemeni, has brought a defamation suit against PR Guy in order to unmask the individual who runs it. And apparently, from all accounts, is being quite successful at that. So Twitter has been ordered, as part of this lawsuit, to hand over the personal information of this account, which includes... includes the IP address, name of the account, and email address at the date of registration. And they're going to hand that over within 14 days. So the IP address, I think, is quite interesting because that's like an IP address allows you to infer a person's location and who the person was that owned the IP address at the time that it was created. What you can do is,
you could go to the internet company. You go, what's an IP address for, I don't know, whatever, Telstra. You go to Telstra and you go, well, I need you could get in theory a court order for that person's information, right?
Yeah.
So you could take the next step by following the trail of evidence, so to speak. Unless, of course, they're using a VPN, in which case, good luck.
Yeah. So VPN, a virtual private network, allows you to mask your IP address from your internet service provider, presumably for scenarios exactly like this one, where you might be called upon to identify an individual. I don't know. I really don't. This gives me the squeegees. I don't like this. It doesn't feel good. Like the whole point of having an anonymous. I kind of like the idea of people having anonymous Twitter accounts and being able to tell their truth. If they've got a perspective from like within government and they're a whistleblower or they're a political dissident or something like that in a country that doesn't allow free speech. If you're one of these bloggers in Bangladesh or whatever that are talking about government corruption and are getting the message out there without endangering themselves, I kind of think that's valuable, and I don't like the idea that a government could just turn around and unmask you at any stage. And I don't know, that feels kind of weird to me.
I think there has to be accountability for the things you say on the internet. I completely disagree. I think if you want to be
you don't think there's any value to having some sort of like whistleblower or
you can. There are ways to do that privately. Like, if you're a whistleblower, why would you do it on Twitter? Go to a journalist. Like, do something.
Yeah. What if the journalists don't? What if you are the journalist and like you're in a country where you're in Burma where if you're a journalist. No, but like you know what I mean. Like if you're a journalist, reporting on corruption. And you don't want to reveal your identity because if you do that, you'll get fucking killed. Like
that's when you get VPNs and stuff, right? But I think from a base level, there has to be like it's because this goes for everyone. Like, it can be the same for Carol from Barilaro Springs or whatever. You know what I mean?
Beryl from Caroline Springs.
Carol from Caroline Springs. She, from that instance, if she's just going, just having a rant in the comments section of an ABC article, like sometimes, you shouldn't be able to just do that anonymously. There should be some sort of accountability to go, well, no, this is a real person. And otherwise, how do you, and also that's the other thing, like how do you, if stuff's just, how do you verify if someone's a real person or not without having that level of data and potential oversight?
I don't know, I think it opens a really dangerous door to be like, anyone who's just tweeting random lols on the internet could now be called up for defamation by, I think a lot of people consider, especially Twitter in the early days, Twitter was just like a place where you put jokes and like shit talked, and it wasn't like a serious journalistic apparatus like it is now, like where people sort of viewed it as their online diary where they would like make jokes about things. So I don't to be able to go and like pull a tweet from 8 years ago, some shitty thing that someone said, and be able to sue them for defamation for it. It's like, by the way, that tweet was like, yeah, it's public, but like, you had 8 followers at the time and no one knows it exists. Like they've just Streisand affected the whole thing by blowing it up.
Well, that's true as well. But that's the thing with defamation as well, to a point, is that, the damages have to be realistic. So, if for Jordan Shanks and Google, they only got $715,000 isn't that much in a scheme of defamation suits. Like,
they've definitely been bigger settlements. Yeah.
So, the damages have to be realistic, right? You can't just sue someone for $1 billion who has 8 followers. Like, it's not, it doesn't work like that. But the thing with, obviously, it's kind of funny because Avi Yemeni as well, like if you go back to this particular instance, he is, well, you'd call him a journalist, I guess, to a point.
Would you?
Look, I don't know if he's got any journalism qualifications, to be honest. It'd be interesting to see if he does. But he has, like Jordan Shanks, has a whole team behind him. He has, he gets donations from people. He's a Patreon and stuff. And his whole thing is it's sort of kind of like the antithesis to Jordan Shanks. He's a right-wing news, on the ground commentary person. And you see him at a lot of like the like climate rallies and stuff, and he'd be like interviewing people being like, what do you think, what's the actual, like, tell me what the actual global emissions is. And then obviously, such and such person at the march doesn't know the answer. He's like, oh, see, these guys are not the fuck they're talking about, and like runs away. He really got a lot of followers with the lockdown stuff. He was very anti-lockdown. And I think his following grew, and he probably pushed him further to the right to some extent. So the whole thing is that PR guy 17 kind of like called him out on a bunch of that stuff with a bunch of tweets. The actual tweets, I'm not sure what they are. But so Yemeni's asked for the information, obviously, so he can then sue the individual making those tweets. Now, whether or not
the reason he wants to unmask this person and learn their address is not to send them a bunch of flowers.
No,
right? Like,
knowing Avi Yemeni, he probably would do more than just sue them. He'd probably also call them out himself. Like, it would be like this whole interchange. You know what I mean?
I don't think I don't think PR Guy 17 being sued for defamation like improves the dialogue at all. It just becomes another like shot across the bow in the culture wars, right? Like, I don't know that the society is not being served by unmasking someone who's deliberately gone out of their way to keep themselves masked. I don't know who's served by that. Like,
I don't know. I just think that given the dialogue we've just spoken about, where the concept of what is a source, what is real, like, is it a bot? Elon Musk at the moment, for instance, who's trying to buy Twitter, wanted all the data or something to do with what tweet data from the last however many years, so he could start to work out what are bots and what are real. And Twitter were kind of not willing to give that information out. Probably fair enough, but the point being is that I think, if we're going to move to a space where we're going to have mature conversations online and it not just be like, and you have people, getting their reputations destroyed I think there has to be a change in the concept of accountability for what you say online. And that probably goes for us as well. Like, I mean, it's pretty
it unnerves me as a podcaster who's talked a lot of shit since 2010. I don't know. Am I responsible for a joke I made 9 years ago as some like early 20s kid who had no fucking clue what he was talking about? Like, is that really the standard that we're setting here? Is like journalistic level threshold for every dumb shit thing I said for the last 12 years?
But if you said something, no, probably not for that. But like, for instance, if you said something now that was incorrect and then got picked up and then was seen by a bunch of people and seen by the person who you were talking about, and then that had a real effect where there were damages to that person's reputation, then you probably should be held accountable. Defamation
That's terrifying, Adam. Think about all the dumb things you've said.
I've said lots of dumb things, but that said, the stuff I've said 5 years ago isn't necessarily anyway in any way related to someone's life at the moment. Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to get at?
I get where you're coming from, but I'm also aware that like
it might destroy my reputation if let's say I was to run for politics. And then someone goes, let's listen to the back catalogue, and they go, he said all these dumb things, and then that destroys my run for politics, my reputation. Yes, that could happen. I'd be the one potentially suing, depending on what was written about me. But
couldn't you see a case where, like, in future, you become a public figure, right? And this has happened to so many people. And someone goes through your old, Twitter or old back catalogues of the show. There's some new voice filtering technology that allows you to, skip exactly to the point where you mention someone in a podcast episode from 10 years ago, which, like if that doesn't already exist, will exist, right? Some sort of AI enabled tagging of search of audio. Yeah. And it comes across some defamatory comment that you made about some public figure 10 years ago. Well, all of a sudden you're a public figure now. And now all of a sudden that's,
but
you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden that's part.
No, but that's not how defamation works, man. Like you can't go.
Isn't it? I don't know.
No, it'd have to be. I'd have to say it now. It would have to get picked up now and be said. It could, like the stuff I've said. I would be the one probably that would have my reputation destroyed potentially, not the other way around. It would be like if I said something now. If we said something now that ended up on Sky News or whatever else.
Don't you think that's a terrifying precedent to set? That like we're just two people talking on the internet, and that at any point something that we say could like massively blow up and become, and we could get sued by a government minister for defamation or something like that, all because we said Peter Dutton had the appearance of Voldemort, of the Lord of Darkness. All of a sudden that gets picked up. We're going to get sued. We're just two guys on the internet. We didn't have the expectation that something that we would say would go out to more than like 200 people because that's the amount of people that listen to the show, right? So, but all of a sudden, you tweet something. I tweet stuff all the time, and there's like sometimes random things that get picked up by the algorithm, and they'll get like 500 retweets and like 50,000 engagements. It's like, well, I have 100 and something followers, so I didn't expect that was going to be the thing that blows up.
This is a separate argument, man. You're talking about whether this is the whole thing with controversial Oscars host and
Oscars host or Golden Globes host?
Golden Globes host. This is the whole Ricky Gervais thing, right? That comedy and satire is dead because everyone gets offended by everything. But that's a separate argument to whether or not someone should be accountable for the things they say on the internet and not be anonymous. I think if I could and this is the thing is that like, what if it was the other way around? What if it was Avi Yemeni having a private Twitter tag and slamming, for instance, David Spears or someone else? Like, what
did he say about him? He was probably right.
Yeah, but like the point being is that like it cuts both ways. Do you know what I mean? And in terms of unmasking who people are on the internet, so that people shouldn't be random trolls. Someone can't call you a cuck and some other derogatory.
Well, interestingly enough, insults are not defamatory. If I call you a cuck piece of shit, that's not defamatory. Saying that you're corrupt and I reckon you stole $3 million,
Yeah, but that's the same thing.
That could be defamatory. That's a different thing.
That, like that's what happens online. People say those things
I don't know. I
online.
kind of feel like, yes, it's gross that that happens. That people are horrible and disgusting to one another online. I don't think they should do that. I don't think people should anonymously shit on one another and be nasty and abusive. But I also recognize humans are humans and humans are garbage, as Tom often says, and they're going to do that. There's nothing you can really do about that to stop them.
Here's the thing, though, because if that was in public, if that was in a town square and they did that, they wouldn't do it because there'd be accountability for their actions. They would have to be held up. The reason why they make those comments online is because there is a veil. They're doing it from what a perceived veil. If we're going to evolve online conversations, we need to have accountability for things that people say. And if that means going, oh yeah, so PR guy 17 is, Bob Smith from whichever suburb, then so be it.
I don't know. It's one thing if you are a person, like my Twitter handle is my name. It's George Tsipos. People know that the George Tsipos that I am online is the same George Tsipos that goes to work. And, there's a difference there because I know I've said those things with the understanding that I'm George. And there is a possibility, hopefully remote, that it could come back to bite me directly because my name's on everything. I think someone who said something under the veil of secrecy to then retroactively be unmasked, I think is I don't know. I feel like it's a really dangerous precedent to set.
Retroactive stuff is rough. I feel like what there should be is going forward, this is the rules, and I think that needs to evolve. This is all, it's never happened before. So it would be the same as, it'd be interesting, this is why I think journalism's an interesting example, because if PR guy 17 actually had a scoop on something, in the old days, you'd give it to a journalist and they would hold you as a source, right? And then that source would be protected under the law. Whereas on Twitter, it's sort of untested. It's you're putting yourself out into the public square.
Yeah, but similarly with journalism, you could background and not be named and say a bunch of shit and put it out into the public sphere without having any accountability for the things that you say because of journalistic privilege, right?
But the journalist would then have to use again, in the old days, journalists would have to use some sort of discretion where they would go, are you a trustworthy source, right? Or are you just some dude on the street reckoning that, and this is funny because there was a guy, there used to be this guy when I used to work in the middle of the city in Melbourne, him and a couple other guys, they would sit there on the corner screaming for a People's Bank and a Royal Commission to the banking sector. And he's holding up photos of his face all bashed in and stuff. And he would do that day after day for years and years and years. But no one took him seriously because he was just some dude on the street screaming, right? But if I feel like if you took his claims now and put them in a different context, maybe he would get listened to because it would be this is a Twitter account and it's saying things,
Well, turns out we did need a royal commission into the banking sector. That was something that we did actually sorely need.
But obviously, in this instance, journalists he's probably been to journalists and they've gone, hey, he's just some crackpot on the street.
I think the problem that it presents, I think the philosophical disagreement that I have with it, and now that we've sort of dug deeply into it, I think it's that it provides, or however problematic it is, being able to anonymously speak on Twitter provides a mechanism to speak truth to power. And yes, there's going to be people that abuse it and do defamation and do all these other nasty things. But I do worry that, yes, we might be comporting with popular opinion now, but if we set this precedent that things that you say on Twitter anonymously can be then used against you later on, I think it's going to have a chilling effect on, which is the purpose, right? As you say, holding people accountable for the things that they say online. I think it's going to have a chilling effect because, yes, we might have the popular opinion now, but what happens when the popular opinion shifts? What happens when it's the Liberals in charge next time around and any sort of pro-abortion views are, no longer sacrosanct and no longer the popular majority opinion, and then they can come after you retroactively for opinions that you used to have or that you had expressed 10 years ago under a cloak of anonymity.
This is where I think, the legislation needs to catch up, right? Where, there has to be greater clarity around that as to what can be brought up as. I mean, in this case, he's seeking it for defamation suit because he's alleging things that the person has said are untrue about him. Defamation, by the way, for online stuff there was an insight on a SBS episode, funnily enough, on this topic a couple of weeks ago. So look it up if you're in Australia.
No, you look it up.
You look it up.
You look it up.
Where this lawyer was just like, don't sue people. It's a terrible way of doing it. You don't actually get out of it what you want, because even if you like Barilaro, perhaps because it was very much in the public eye and people are reporting on it, but in the vast majority of cases, like for Avi Yemeni, I don't think having, for the amount of traction he actually has, the amount of money that he would have to spend to successfully sue PR Guy 17, even if they settle,
I don't think it's about that.
He's not actually going to get his reputation back.
It's not about getting his reputation back. This is him using the system to become the center of a national news story and become a thing that everyone is talking about. It's all about, for him, raising his profile, right?
True as well, yeah. So
because now we've got articles in The Guardian talking about Avi Yemeni.
And then that goes into the Google search algorithms and whatever else, right?
All of a sudden, his YouTube channel, which is getting whatever it is, 400,000 subscribers, now has 500,000. So I think it reinforces a negative pattern of behavior because it actually incentivizes nuisance lawsuits to a degree.
It's kind of like
defamation as a legal mechanism just feels like horribly blunt and completely insufficient. It is not appropriate to the task of holding people accountable for things that they say online. It is the bluntest of instruments.
That was what the lawyer was saying, was basically. So in the thrust of it being here is that the legislation around online activity is like 20 years behind where it needs to be. And it probably always will be, because every so often technology evolves and then the legislation is then, even if you update it, is then outdated again. So yeah, it's murky. It's tricky. It seems to be this thing at the moment where the right wing are just suing everyone, left, right, and center. But whether or not some of these cases stand up will be interesting. And we know that, the one against Peter Dutton, I think the guy won on appeal.
Shane Barzy, yeah.
So yeah, it's an
concerning.
interesting, evolving situation.
As someone who talks on the internet on a regular basis in an improvisational style for comedic purposes, but nonetheless, it does bother me that some throwaway comment that I made in jest or with irony, or sometimes you just talk about, you're talking about stuff that you haven't necessarily prepared. The conversation takes a turn that you weren't expecting. Maybe you say something misinformed, or maybe you're just you make a joke and it doesn't quite land, and it just comes across as a nasty thing that you said because you were trying to fill the space in a conversation. All of those things that you would encounter in just a regular conversation on a person-to-person basis, and now documented for the record because of the nature of the podcast, right? So I find it quite concerning.
It's got to be, you would have to, it has to be, for someone to successfully sue you, there has to be some sort of damage.
But they don't, here's the thing, is in order to ruin your life, they don't have to successfully sue you.
No. They
right?
could.
If someone's got deep pockets, like Peter Thiel or something like that, did this with BuzzFeed, they pissed him off. And so he funded a lawsuit through that wrestler guy, saying, they distributed his sex tape without his permission. What was his name? The former wrestler. It doesn't matter. Peter Thiel, the billionaire, helped to fund this lawsuit, which ended up being successful, and then BuzzFeed, the internet news organization, ended up getting taken down as a result. So it's someone who's got deep pockets could just fund nuisance lawsuits against you and ruin your life, even
BuzzFeed.
if those. But BuzzFeed no longer exists.
Oh, really? Where have I been for the last?
Was it BuzzFeed? No, not BuzzFeed.
No, BuzzFeed is still here, I think.
Not BuzzFeed. Is the other one. Was it Gawker?
I don't know. Although I'm just looking at the BuzzFeed website, and there are a lot of ads.
Hulk Hogan, Hulk Hogan versus Gorka, not BuzzFeed. Sorry, excuse me. But
so
yes,
there's a case. There's an example where you.
There you go. I got sued.
Yeah, but like
no,
thing
but
is,
you understand what I'm saying? It's like it doesn't need to
Doesn't
be
have to be a
successful.
suit, yeah.
All they need to do is bog you down with a lawsuit, 1 lawsuit, 2 lawsuits, 3. Well, all of a sudden your life's ruined from legal fees. It doesn't even matter if you win the lawsuits.
They don't even have to necessarily sue you. They could just call you out online, and you'd start getting death threats.
Internet pylon.
Yeah. In which case, we would be the ones suing, potentially.
If you can afford to sue. I think suing is one of those mechanisms that's like works out super good for rich white dudes and not so good for basically anyone else.
Yeah. Another reason why defamation is a blunt instrument for resolving things. So that's what we'll probably spend. We'll probably need to move on to the other stuff. But yeah, it's an evolving thing. It seems to be like at the moment everyone's suing everyone for shit that was said online. So we'll keep talking about, we'll keep the discussion going, you know?
Unless, of course, we get sued.
Unless we get sued, in which case we'll go offline. And,
in which case we'll cease and desist. George Tsipos was never here.
Never here. So in terms of like making bold statements, which could potentially come back to bite me, the previous government were terrible and didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and also decided to not do anything for the last year in office, apparently.
Fortunately, Adam, you'll be pleased to know that truth is a defense so to defamation action. So in this case, I don't see anyone suing you for defamation on that front.
There's a couple of things here. And we'll circle back to probably some of the things that will be interesting to see how this develops over the next little while. But you put a thing up on the chat the other day, which was, I think, we're in this phase now, which is the what did you call it? It was the government.
It's the phase where we get all the skeletons out of the closet. Hang on, what was the wording that I used? Or something like, we're in the let's out everything that's fucked up about the previous regime, so we don't have to own it later on phase.
Which is exactly what's happening at the moment, where
oh look, some skeletons in the closet. Have you guys seen these?
And the first one we'll talk about is obviously energy, right? Is the big thing at the moment. Cost of living, energy prices. One of the things that's related to that is that Snowy Hydro, which was Snowy Hydro 2.0, shall we say?
Electric Boogaloo.
Was flaunted by the Turnbull government in 2017 as being the second coming of Christ. Oh god, like Turnbull was so chuffed about it. It was kind of awkward. Basically, the point being is they were going to double the capacity of the existing Snowy Hydro scheme, which was done back in the 50s and 60s. From memory.
What is Snowy Hydro for people who are unaware?
It is hydroelectric dams and electricity generation coming off those dams. And back in the 50s, they got all the migrant workers together and they helped build the nation building. And there's a lot of, and it was like it's a massive scheme, right? Like the undertaking when it initially launched was one of the biggest, if not the biggest, infrastructure project in Australia at the time. And similarly, the second 2.0, which where they're going to expand the scheme, is a massive undertaking. That was 2017, though, that they launched that. It is, according to current estimates, about 19 months behind schedule. It's meant to be worth about $5.1 billion in terms of the delay. But this was the centerpiece, right, of when the Liberals were talking about climate change and whether or not this was a real thing and all this kind of like, the skipping around the bush without actually dealing with the issue kind of stuff that the former Liberal government and national government did. They would always go, well, we've got Snowy Hydro. We've got Snowy Hydro. We've got Snowy Hydro. So we can't be. We do renewables. We're doing Snowy Hydro. So,
Snowy Hydro was the fig leaf across the genitals in terms of the LNP's clean energy policy, wasn't it? It's like, no, well, technically, miss, I wasn't completely nude because I do have a Snowy Hydro dam underway. So
that is an absolutely amazing analogy for what this was, right? In any conversation, in any Q&A setting, we've got Snowy Hydro. So yeah, it's just been It's massively behind. It's a complete fuck up. I mean, they'll get it done, but we're currently in an energy crisis. If they'd sort of done this and they kept to their schedule, it could potentially be something that would help around about now. But it's going to push its start date past 2025 at the moment.
That's until the end of the decade, I thought.
Well, yeah. I mean, they were thinking that worst case there's about 19 months to 2 years, something like that.
Which, by the way, I know
they might get it to 13 months, best case scenario.
I know mega projects, the first thing you learn when studying project management is
creep, right?
shit is hard and scope creep is a thing. And it is hard for these mega projects to be delivered on time and on budget. But it does feel like a particularly big bungle of this huge scheme. For it to be 5 years in and to already be 19 months behind schedule, it seems like a not good thing for that to be the case.
The thing that, and there's going to be a theme here. We're going to go through this. The theme and the thing that I'm a little bit shocked about with all this is that we didn't know about this. We didn't know that it was behind. The government knew. The company that's running it knew. But did the public know prior to the election? No, we didn't. We're now knowing it after the election. So take that, and then let's go to the next article, which is from the Saturday paper, which is it's a bit left.
Are you downloading anything? Your sound's coming through a little bit choppy at the moment.
Let me double check for you. Not that I know of, unless Windows has decided to update everything at once.
It does sometimes do that.
Am I okay, or am I?
You're sounding just a little bit robotic.
Oh no! Stop me if it gets bad. I'm getting some packet loss, I think.
Not my packets.
Yeah, it's dropping back and forth. It's with my connection. It's dropping in and out. Could be the modem. Anyway, there's an article from the Saturday paper, which is a lefty sort of newspaper, but they've sort of been.
You say lefty, I say accurate.
I say accurate. They've been talking to various ministers who have just come into office, and they're talking about sort of what state the portfolios are in. And a lot of them are not good.
Not good.
Not good at all. So let's use energy, keeping on the theme of energy. So we're in the worst energy crisis since the 1970s. Anyway, Angus Taylor didn't, some of this stuff, the causes to this crisis have been brewing for longer than 12 months, right? The Ukraine war has exacerbated it, sure. But the thing that the local triggers to all this, gas supply, coal-fired power plants going offline and not being reliable, these things have they've all been there. They're not so they've suddenly a thing. Angus Taylor signed a bit of legislation prior to the election, rather than telling everyone about all this stuff, by the way. He passed a bit of legislation, a regulatory change. So maybe not legislation, but signed off on a regulatory change that allowed public reporting of wholesale energy prices to be delayed until after the federal election.
That's convenient.
So he deliberately made a change to one of the biggest crises that's affecting, mum and dad Australians, whatever, people at the grassroots level of Australia, whatever you want to call it. He deliberately signed a regulatory change to not tell people about that.
Yeah, that's cooked.
Just let that sink in for a second. Let that sink in.
No. I haven't got bad grades. I'm just signing a regulatory change that prevents you, the teacher, from discussing my grades with my family.
No, I haven't got cancer. I'm just signing a piece of paper that says that I'm not going to.
That you can't discuss my cancer. Yeah, you can't say that you can diagnose me. You just can't use the word cancer or have.
It's not an invasion. It's a special military.
It's a special military operation. Yes, exactly right. Don't mention the war.
Like, I'm more than willing to like recognize that there are culture wars in the things that we discuss, and I'm very cognizant of that. But that act is reprehensible. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There are people at the moment who are unable to pay their power bills, and there's a government that's coming in to help. That are effectively trying to pick up the pieces here of what was left behind, and they didn't know about half of this shit. There are so many, as George said, there are skeletons in the closet that are absolutely fucked. Some of this stuff has been discussed previously. I'll give you one example: the arts sector. The arts sector is broken.
That's famously so.
Because there's been, the Howard government era, and then there's been the 9 years of Liberals where arts funding has just consistently been cut.
I remember when they just doubled the cost of arts degrees for no particular reason other than to say, fuck you.
Just fuck you. So there is, for instance, an unsigned briefs to a $67 million funding shortfall for the National Gallery of Australia. The NDIS is obviously cooked at the moment. So there's still they delayed pricing decisions under the NDIS, which no one knew about. So
yeah, Bill Shorten's. It's like that meme. I don't know if you've seen that meme of Community from the show Community, where it's like Donald Glover's gone out to get some pizzas, and then he comes back, and then everyone's on fire and running around. He's just kind of like, oh, what happened? That's the Labor government. The incoming Labor government has just come in, looked around, and just gone, what the fuck happened in here?
And the public servants, apparently, a lot of these, well, this is, again, it's all backgrounded. They haven't named a lot of names in this article, so take that with a grain of salt. But a lot of some people have said that a lot of people in the public service have just been sort of just going with the flow because any ideas have been sort of put down.
It's like a running joke in Yes Minister.
Yeah.
Right? Like that the civil service is there to they're just kind of ministers come and go and they just want to survive and get their paychecks kind of, throughout sort of thing.
Give you another example from this article. In the social services portfolio, new minister Amanda Rishworth is rushing to complete the next national plan to end violence against women and children with just 2 weeks to go before the current one expires. Work had been happening on that, she says, but it all seemed very last minute and rushed. And that's one of her first
and normal
to figure that out. But they hadn't really planned to do anything properly with the new one because they figure, well, it's not our issue. There's no continuity planning, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, it's particularly the Angus Taylor one, and we'll talk about why that's pretty broken in a second. But that is just fucked, absolutely fucked. Another example in March, then Environment Minister Susan Ley effectively abolished legislative recovery plans for 176 threatened plants, animals, and habitats. In a move that was not made public until after the election, when the Guardian Australia revealed the decision. Incoming Minister Tanya Plibersek asked her department for an urgent briefing because she found the news alarming. All these little sort of decisions that have just been sort of hidden away.
Yeah, they've just been memory holed and just never revealed to the. You can't be unpopular for a thing that nobody knows anything about. I'm not saying it's a cover up, but we're just going to cover these things up and not let anyone know about them until after the election. It's just I think it's also the thing that I find really interesting about this, and that's the thing that they talk about in this article, is it's just the profound laziness of it all.
Laziness.
It's not as though, I don't know, there's just ideological differences. I think taxes should be higher. I think taxes should be lower. It's just you really just get the impression. Well, here's a minister says, this is a quote, "You absolutely get the sense that nothing was happening towards the end, and some of it was entirely due to ideological bastardry." It's just no, they were happy to let things languish because they're just fundamentally, the Liberals don't fundamentally believe in the ability of government to improve people's lives. They're just our government needs to be small, and if all we need to do is completely neglect certain areas of the government to keep it small, then that's what we'll do. Who gives a fuck? We don't give a fuck about the arts, so fuck them. let him rot.
Either that, or it could be that and this. But the concept that they were that unconfident of winning the election, they thought, no, fuck you, Labor. We'll just leave you a pile of shit.
It could be that as well. Yeah, they thought they were going to lose, so why try? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, what does that say about, the people that you're electing? I'll give you one more thing from this article that caught my eye, and we'll talk about this in relation to energy. So, obviously, there's an energy crisis. Chris Bowen, first thing he did, got all the state ministers together, and they had a meeting about it to go, well, let's talk about the issues around energy.
How we're going to meet our renewable energy targets, and that's like, how can we work together on this sort of thing?
How can we solve the fact that energy is broken at the moment and the grid's about to go offline, basically, was the discussion. And they've, out of that, they agreed to develop a framework to transition away from renewables. Other way around, to transition to renewables away from the coal-fired power plants.
But it's like, it's 2022. How has no one had this discussion up until this point?
Angus Taylor just hasn't done that. Hasn't done that. Can you believe it? They committed to net zero 2050 and they hadn't thought about how the fuck they were going to do that, George.
It's not important. Don't worry about it. You're thinking about it, don't think about it.
How would they not even discussed that amongst the states?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh my God.
There was
just can't even. Ah!
There was a you just get the impression that it was just like they just did like the functioning of government was just not they were not interested in government functioning. Right? Like
just did not care. And like they've fired a bunch of key public servants. This always happens when they change government. They get rid of the secretaries, right, of any department. So Phil Gaetjens, who was mentioned a lot in the news for being the person that a lot of problems were referred to. So no, I've referred to the problem to my to the secretary, the head of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, Phil Gaetjens. He's been removed, and they apparently removed him pretty quickly. Right-winger Gary Johns has announced his resignation as the Commissioner of Australian Charities and Non-for-Profits. So, yeah, I don't know. It just feels pretty bad this time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't remember this being that bad when Labor took over.
This was a good one. In early May, Scott Morrison announced an expansion of the Commonwealth Seniors Health Card that would make it available to a further 50,000 Australians from July 1. It was an election offering and Labor matched it. In government, however, the ALP discovered that the legislation to enact the change was non-existent. So it's like things that like this was your own idea, the thing that you were going to enact if you got back into government.
Let's do it.
And they're like, yeah, don't worry about it. We'll worry about it later if we get in or not. I guess if we don't have to worry about it. But it's just like these are your changes, your ideas. And then Labor gets there and it's just like, they open the door as an empty office. There's a spider web in the corner of the wall. There's no chair. Like there's just like a rat sneaking off into the corner.
Macca's container from like 5 years ago, just like rotting away.
It's just like it's just unbelievable the neglect. And I don't know, is it just because they were busy campaigning, or is it just like and they didn't give a fuck, or they were just lazy? Or they were just like, they thought they were going to lose. And so, like you say, they're leaving a big heap of shit for the next guys to clean up. I genuinely don't know. But like, it's fucked. It's really bad. Like, not just like poor form, poor sportsmanship, but also just like a complete neglect of like an utter letdown of why you were sent to Canberra in the first place, which was to represent the wishes of your constituents. Like it's just like complete failure at every level.
We'll go to the next article now. The best part about this is now for Liberals and Nationals are now transitioned to being the opposition, and now they're trying to be like, well, if Labor were responsible, they'd be doing this.
Yeah, immediately talking about debt and deficit reduction, and like, Labor's being crazy with the spending. I was like, bro, you quintupled the debt since Labor was last in charge, and you've led us with like, there's like $1 trillion of debt. Why is my dog?
Not to mention you outspent them. You outspent them.
Oh, there was a period. There was a
period.
period during the election campaign where the Liberals were pledging $800 million a day during the election campaign. And then all of a sudden they found their budget repair bona fides. The morning after the election, they wake up, you wake up hungover going, oh, what the fuck did I do last night? I pledged so much fucking money. Oh, man, I need to do some serious budget repair now that I'm sober.
That's what it was like, right? It was like a big night out. And they're like, oh, I probably should be responsible about that.
And to turn around with a straight face and go, or better yet, David Littleproud, head of the Nationals, was going after Chris Bowen because he wants to have a mature conversation about nuclear energy. All of a sudden, you've been in power for the last 9 years, and all of a sudden they've got some ideas about energy and how we should handle this whole sort of energy crisis situation. The day after you fucking get voted out, you go, actually, we've got some constructive ideas. Then how come you didn't do none of them, prick? How come you didn't do none of these fucking fantastic ideas that you have?
I think Chris Bowen, upon hearing those comments, was like
burst into flames
with rage. Yeah, just like
died. It's like the ultimate fucking bad faith troll. And Chris Bowen's like, well, we're not going to do nuclear energy because A, it takes a median of 7 years to stand up a nuclear energy plant. You fucking sentient thumb. Okay. And it's one of the most expensive forms of energy that you can buy. Yep. The ROI is just not there for nuclear because if it was, we would have done it already. David Littleproud's like, well, we should run the ruler over it just to have a look. It's like,
it's just an idea, bro.
Just throwing some things out there after I've been in control for a fucking decade. Just throwing some ideas out.
I think once nuclear energy is running, it's fine. But to get it going,
it's pointless. It's pointless talking about nuclear energy because it's at least a minimum of 7 years away. Okay, assuming that and even if it did run, the whole problem that we're having now is baseload power. When the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow, what are the things you can quickly scale up and scale down to meet the shortfall in energy, right? And previously that's been coal. Right? Coal is definitely going out of style. The plants are being depreciated. Like, it's not a thing anymore. The coal plants, as you say, you mentioned earlier, they had several outages this week. The coal plants are just like, it's old tech. It's not up to snuff. It's bad. And it seems like the answer is gas. Unfortunately, because of the crisis in Ukraine, Australian gas has all of a sudden become very desirable to, internationally. So it's not a thing that you can easily solve. It's a shortage. We've had a cold snap as well. It's been the coldest start to winter since like 1970 something as well. So it's like it's a whole confluence of different factors that are putting pressure on this system. And to just go, oh, give us a fucking nuclear reactor. Hey, it's got to be it's honestly, either you're a fucking idiot or you're just a bad, terrible person. Like those are the only two. It's like you're a fucking medical grade moron or you're launching a bad faith attack. I don't know what's the other thing that it can be.
James from marketing who has just gone, we need some, from the PR agencies gone, we'll talk about some counterpoints. We haven't, no one's discussed nuclear recently, have we?
Yeah, it's some prick from marketing that's just like thrown it up on the board in a brainstorm. And then I guess
these are my talking points then.
Yeah, it's literally that thing like in Utopia where someone would, suggest something to the minister and he goes, you're not going to use that, are you? He goes, no, I'm just making notes. And then it appears in the headline the next day. Like,
fucking Jesus.
It's just like to suggest, and I understand why Chris Bowen, because he's like a serious person who understands climate change. And then the Murdoch media turns around and says, David Littleproud slams Chris Bowen comments on nuclear energy and calls for a quote mature conversation. We just want to have a mature conversation, babe. What's wrong with you? Why are you getting so emotional? Oh, you on your period, babe? You're so emotional. What the fuck's wrong with you? It's the ultimate fucking gaslighting.
It is, yeah, it really is, and it'll continue, for the next several years because that's what people do at opposition. They
I know that, but to switch back. To be so mentally flexible like that, it's just like it's like this, like I've got whiplash from it. It's like, it's so the mental gymnastics that you can so seamlessly engage in to like completely reverse yourself in order to attack the opposition. It just makes me wonder if there's like a real person in there at all, or if you're just an empty suit full of ideological talking. It's just a note from Rupert Murdoch inside your suit. There's actually no person in there whatsoever. Like,
it's just a HTML web page with different algorithms that just come up every so often. You just go to the next talking point.
It's just a Sky News web page.
Yeah.
David Littleproud isn't even a real person. He's a Ken doll who's running Sky News fucking algorithms. Like, it's honestly just I don't know how you can say it with a straight face. And I know that'll fade over the next couple of weeks and months as Labor starts to have to own some of the problems that are going on, and people start thinking it's Labor's fault rather than the Liberals' fault. But like, to be able to for Angus Taylor and for David Littleproud to turn around and say this like weeks after the election is like breathtaking. It's audacity. It is breathtaking in its audacity.
Go back in your fucking box and just sit there for a bit. Like, there's nothing, like anything you say at the moment is basically, particularly when we're finding out all this fucked cooked shit.
Yeah. How's about you go sit in the naughty corner for a couple of weeks and just shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
Let them get some fucking personnel into the departments and get the departments functioning again. And then go from there. And then that was the other thing. Like there was a story the other day about how they'd found.
Hey, look, Labor's
the passports office.
Yes. Yes.
So
let's open up the doors to the passports office, and it's just like, and I'm sure we'll see. I'm sure we'll see a bunch of resources being deployed here to get people their passports on time. It's just like, there's just an empty office.
Critically under-resourced. Right, like you'd expect if you open borders up, like there would be public servants that would go, "Oh, we're probably going to expect."
That's what I kept saying throughout the pandemic. How do we keep getting caught by surprise by this shit? There was no fucking person that wrote out a 6-month plan. No one in all of the department that says like, "This is what we're going to have to look forward to in 18 months."
Yeah, like there's literally nothing. Anyway, the good, and we'll finish on this very quickly because we're now way over time. But funnily enough. Mark Dreyfus, new Attorney General, has decided that the ICAC, which apparently is so hard, we can't do an ICAC. No,
can't do it. Can't be done.
Problems with the legislation. It's very bulky. It's unwieldy. We have to refine it. It's not quite right yet. No, it's going to be ready by the middle of next year, apparently. So,
12 months.
It's too hard, apparently. But middle of next year, according to Mark Dreyfus. So.
And the thing I like about this...
They can be done, as it turns out.
We were talking about this last week with the Barilaro family. It's just like, it turns out you can just like do the right thing. At any point, you could just like choose to do the right thing. And we've had 9 years of a government that just like profoundly gave no fucks about anyone except themselves. And it's just like, turns out you could just send the family back to Barilaro. Turns out you can just start an ICAC. Like you can do all the things that we all knew that you should be doing. You just chose not to.
What I'm really keen for is, and the best thing about that is the ICAC will be retrospective.
I noticed that as well. That was my favorite part too.
So for shit like Angus Taylor signing a bit of regulation to like deliberately mislead the public, that might
turn up.
Maybe that'll turn up. Maybe that'll pop into the remit. Maybe
really hope the next 3 years is just various hearings where senior members of the Liberal Party get up in front of a podium and say, "I don't recall," 50 to 70 times.
That's exactly what it's going to be.
I just hope it's that for the next 3 years. So then the next time we roll around to a fucking election, you go, "Hey, you going to vote for us or you got to vote for the guys who can't fucking recall where they live?"
What's your name?
I don't recall. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. My name is...
Jesus.
I just hope it's that on a loop ad nauseum for 3 years. So the next time we come to an election, people will remember, hey, here's all this corrupt, fucked, cooked shit that these guys did while they were in government. Who do you want to vote for?
Like, it's I'm assuming most of the personnel in various public service roles aren't probably going to change. It'll be the heads of departments that'll change.
Or the ministers or whatever. Service.
But I'm hoping that there will be ideas that may have been shouted down before or that weren't encouraged, that there may be, maybe some public servants have got some things in the file in the file tray that they can just be like, oh, here's some stuff that I prepared 6 years ago that wasn't looked at. So maybe there's some stuff ready to go and there will be some ideas listened to. going forward, and it's not a complete rebuild, so to speak, to use football terminology. We're not going to have a complete rebuild of the NDIS, which puts it back 10 years or something.
I do have this. There is this feeling of sort of hope to a certain degree. That's like, well, we might be able to do something again, and things like, being I don't know. There's a certain amount of like this bad faith political argument stuff that I see in the news that's like, man, if I'd have seen that 3 weeks ago, I would have been really concerned. But now there's this feeling like the air's sort of been let out of their tires a little bit. It's like kind of no one takes you seriously anymore. The LNP talking about nuclear, just whipping out the super fast train of energy policy out of their back pocket. Everyone's just kind of like, nah, bro, we actually don't buy this bullshit anymore. And like everyone sees through it, and we know that. I don't know. I feel like there is a certain comfort to that, or it's like maybe it could be the dawn of like a new era where it's like, yeah, we don't have to take you seriously anymore because you guys got fucking decimated at the last election. We don't actually care what you have to say. Like you're nobody. And that could be, I don't know, it's potentially exciting.
We'll hopefully have some content over the next few years. But yeah.
Don't worry, there'll still be fuck ups. And this is something that I'm going to stake my claim in the sand right now. This federal ICAC will bite Labor in the butt at some point, and good. And people go, oh, what would happen? People don't want a federal ICAC. What happens if it's your side that does the corrupt shit? And I'm like, good. That we don't want any corruption. I don't care which side the corrupt shit is on. I guarantee it's going to be more LNP than Labor, right? I just guarantee that just because of the sample size, right? The economies of scale. There is so much corruption, obvious corruption on the other side, and they've been in charge for the last 9 years that I think it's bound to be more liberal than Labor. But yeah, it will. There will be some sort of Labor corruption scandal and at some point, and someone's going to get taken out as a result of it. And my response to that is good. That is how it should work. It should work on both sides of the aisle, because that's what good governance is. It's holding people to account for their corruption, regardless of which side of politics they're on. It's something that the Liberals can never grasp. It's like, oh, well, if we set up an anti-corruption commission, then they'll come after us. And they're like, yeah, that's the point. That's my argument. So
they dug the well too deep and now they can't get out of it, but we'll see.
You got to dig up, you idiot. Dig up. On that note, we have been, we are, and we always will be Unnatural Selection. Make sure you visit us at our salubrious home on the web, unnaturalshow.com. Make sure you follow us on all the bullshit social medias that are ruining the world, that have, do, or ever will exist. That's Unnatural Show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, motherfucking TikTok. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Twitter at George Tsipos.
You can follow me on Instagram at AC Doreen.
You can follow us all down to Avi Yemeni's IP address, where we'll be having a lovely civil chat with him about the areas of political disagreement that we have.
Yeah, it'll be a very formal mediation session.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be lots of, no idea is a bad idea. We'll put it on the board.
Lots of good faith.
Then we'll run it past David Littleproud and he'll use them as his talking points.
Thanks for listening, guys. Love your faces. We'll see you next week.